on 9/11 didn't succeed because they had advanced technology, because they were particularly smart, because they were 10 feet tall. They succeeded because we let our guard down and we were stupid. We need to recognize that the threat posed by violent Islamic radicalism, by terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda, really is akin to a criminal conspiracy, a violent conspiracy, a dangerous conspiracy. But it's a criminal enterprise. And the primary response to a criminal enterprise is policing. Policing as in organizations like the FBI, intelligence organizations, some special operations forces that would undertake a concerted campaign to identify and root out and destroy this criminal conspiracy. But that doesn't require invading and occupying countries. Again, one of the big mistakes the Bush administration made, and it's a mistake we're still paying for, is that the president persuaded us that the best way to prevent another 9/11 is to embark upon a global war. Wrong. The best way to prevent another 9/11 is to organize an intensive international effort to root out and destroy that criminal conspiracy.
You, in fact, say that instead of a bigger army, we need a smaller, more modest foreign policy, one that assigns soldiers missions that are consistent with their capability. Modesty, I'm quoting you, requires giving up on the illusions of grandeur to which the end of the Cold War and then 9/11 gave rise. It also means reining in the imperial presidents who expect the Army to make good on those illusions. Do you expect either John McCain or Barack Obama to rein in the imperial presidency?
No. I mean, people run for the presidency in order to become imperial presidents. The people who are advising these candidates, the people who aspire to be the next national security advisor, the next secretary of defense, these are people who yearn to exercise those kind of great powers. They're not running to see if they can make the Pentagon smaller. They're not. So, I mean, as a distant observer of politics, one of the things that both puzzles me and I think troubles me is the 24/7 coverage of the campaign. You know, parsing every word, every phrase that either Senator Obama or Senator McCain utters, as if what they say is going to reveal some profound and important change that was going to come about if they happen to be elected. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen because?
Not going to happen. It's not going to happen because the elements of continuity outweigh the elements of change, and it's not going to happen because ultimately we, the American people, refuse to look in that mirror and to see the extent to which the problems that we face really lie within. We refuse to live within our means. We continue to think that the problems that beset the country are out there, beyond our borders, and that if we deploy a sufficient amount of American power, we can fix those problems, and therefore things back here will continue as they have for decades.
I was in the White House back in the early 60s, and I've been a White House watcher ever since, and I have never come across a more distilled essence of the evolution of the presidency than in just one paragraph in your book. You say, beginning with the election of John F. Kennedy in 1960, the occupant of the White House has become a combination of demigod, father figure, and inevitably the betrayer of inflated hopes. Pope, pop star, scold, scapegoat, crisis manager, commander-in-chief, agenda settler, moral philosopher, interpreter of the nation's charisma, object of veneration and the butt of jokes all rolled into one. I would say you nailed the modern presidency.
Well, and I think the troubling part is because of this preoccupation with, fascination with the presidency, the president has become what we have instead of genuine politics, instead of genuine democracy. We look to the president, to the next president. You know, we know that the current president's a failure and a disappointment. We look to the next president to fix things. And of course, as long as we have this expectation that the next president is going to fix things, then of course that lifts all responsibility from me to fix things. One of the real problems with the imperial presidency, I think, is that it has hollowed out our politics, and in many respects has made our democracy a false one. We're going through the motions of a democratic political system, but the fabric of democracy, I think, really has worn very thin.
The other consequence of the imperial presidency, as you point out, is that for members of the political class, that would include the media that covers the political class, serving, gaining access to, reporting on, second-guessing, or gossiping about the imperial president, or about those aspiring to succeed him, as in this campaign, has become an abiding preoccupation.
My job is not to be a media critic, but I mean, you cannot help but be impressed by the amount of ink spilled on Obama and McCain compared to how little attention is given, for example, to the races in the Senate and the House. Now, one could say perhaps that makes sense because the Congress has become such a dysfunctional body, but it really does describe a disproportion, I think, of attention that is a problem.
Would the imperial presidency exist were it not for the Congress?
No, I think the imperial presidency would not exist but for the Congress, because the Congress, since World War II, has thrust power and authority onto the presidency.
Here is what I take to be the core of your analysis of our political crisis. You write, the United States has become a de facto one-party state, with the legislative branch permanently controlled by an incumbents party, and every president exploiting his role as commander-in-chief to expand on the imperial prerogatives of his office.
One of the great lies about American politics is that Democrats genuinely subscribe to a set of core convictions that make Democrats different from Republicans. And the same thing, of course, applies to the other party. It's not true. I happen to define myself as a conservative. Well, what do conservatives say they stand for? Well, conservatives say they stand for balanced budgets, small government, the so-called traditional values. When you look back over the past 30 or so years since the rise of Ronald Reagan, which in many respects has been a conservative era in American politics, well, do we get small government? Do we get balanced budgets? Do we get